I certainly would like to explore more about what they did find in Solomon's Temple, and if you look at movies that are put out by Freemasons like Lucas and Spielberg, you can see little hints in all of their movies about what these Freemasons are about and what interests them and who they are.
Okay, you mentioned the infamous acronym UFO again. In the book, you talk about Project Blue Book that has been done to death. Was that a U.S. government cover-up? Or was it the government going, look, we've got a budget, this is stupid, let's just move on?
No, that was it was a cover-up. I talk about the 1952 merry-go-round at Washington, D.C. What happened was the switchboards got flooded with phone calls, and so the people in the Central Intelligence Agency and in the White House, the first thing they said was, look, this is a national security issue, because if we get attacked by the Russians, that's a whole nother crock right there, but supposedly if there's some kind of an attack, or if somebody can make this illusion, and our switchboards are crowded, we'll never be able to mount a defense against an attack. So the one thing was, okay, it's a national security issue. We can't have our telephone lines clogged up. Other thing was that these are obviously something that we don't really understand, and so we need to study this, and we need to get the technology. And so the only thing I really talk about these cover-up things is that in 1952 they came up with two groups. They had one military group that just went out, and I guess it would be your men in black, that made fun of people and ridiculed people and destroyed their lives and careers for reporting UFOs. And then on the other side, they were going out and collecting as much evidence and technology as they possibly could. So, there's and so just think about all these poor people who had their lives destroyed just because they wanted, people to know the truth. But so that's, as far as the Blue Book thing goes, it's just the government saying, oh, yeah, we're out doing something, but there's nothing to it, which, obviously more government lying.
Okay, I'm a scientific kind of a guy, well, kind of, sort of, and I think it would be stupid to assume that we're the only life form in the universe. From a statistical point of view, it would seem unlikely. However, also from a statistical point of view, it seems unlikely that anyone with any sense, or any alien with any sense, would want to visit this small blue-green planet that seems to do nothing other than bicker and produce sitcoms. Why on earth would anyone want to visit us other than to make a sitcom for their own world?
Well, I don't know. I don't know what's in their minds. I can, if you want me to, I can explain to you the Latter-day Saint connection to UFOs, if you would like.
Sure.
Okay. So first of all, let's talk about, let's get a definition of, let's leave UFOs alone, and let's talk about extraterrestrials. Okay, the United States government has a classification, and this is what I talk about in the book, that they have a classification, extraterrestrial biological entity, EBE, right? That must mean that there is also a extraterrestrial non-biological entity. Doesn't that make sense? Why would they call it a biological entity if there's non-biological entities out there? Okay, so with that in mind, let's talk about Okay, Joseph Smith, a young kid, 14 years old, he gets a visit from these people that he thinks are God and his son Jesus Christ, and they come and they talk to him. Okay, now I'm not going to say that he talked to God or Jesus Christ. That's people's own belief, but he's saying that he was visited by people that are not from the earth, or beings that are not from the earth, right? Okay, so there's an extraterrestrial connection right there. And then as you go on, I talk about in my book, and this is not really common knowledge in the Latter-day Saint Church, but Joseph Smith had a friend named Edward Tullidge, and Edward Tullidge fell out of the church after Joseph Smith was assassinated, because he didn't believe where Brigham Young was taking the church. Brigham Young wanted a modern day Israel in the desert, that kind of thing, complete control, set up your Zion, and no outside crazy ideas, very conservative. And so Brigham Young wanted nothing, but Edward Tullidge was told by Joseph Smith that there are many different what he called lawgivers and civilizations out there, and that what the Mormons call, and I believe the Freemasons have it as well. The Mormons have what is called a priesthood, and it is for males, and it is for people who are worthy and meet all the expectations and don't drink and pay their tithing and all that. But there are certain ceremonies like handshakes and greetings that people that go through the temple have, and Joseph Smith said those are necessary because when you come into contact with these other races, some of them are evil, and this is in the 1830s. Okay, this isn't 1978 or Roswell. This is in the 1830s. He's telling people there are evil extraterrestrials and there are good ones, and that this is how you can use the priesthood to know that, because some of these beings also hold the priesthood of Jesus Christ. And I even heard the Catholic priest once make a joke that, yes, we're starting to change our ideas about UFOs because we don't want the Mormons out there converting them all, right? Tongue in cheek. But anyway, Joseph Smith believed that there were extraterrestrials, and who more, because he claimed to have these visits from extraterrestrials, and not only from God and Jesus Christ, but from an angel, Moroni, that you see on the Mormon temples, that came and said that the last days of the earth are here, and that trumpet, he's calling the world to repentance. That's why that angel is sitting on the top of the temple. He's calling the world to repent.
Okay.
So anyway, let me finish. Okay, so that's the connection with the UFOs. Okay, so what are they doing here? They work for. There is a greater knowledge, intelligence, something, and it does not have to be necessarily in our dimension. But there is some, and we're understanding now. And I talk about in my book about different dimensions. We're understanding now that possibly maybe the sun and the stars actually are operating in multiple dimensions, and maybe we're operating in multiple dimensions. We don't know, but I'll tell you what. I have been in a Latter-day Saint temple. I've never actually been through as somebody doing the rites, because I've never. Well, that's a different story, But in an LDS temple, I do know that they hold a mirror on opposite walls, so that if you're standing there, you can see yourself into eternity, right? And that is an idea of dimensions. And how do these people who are supposed to be ignorant, like potato farmers, how do they understand all of these things, and how do they have all of this knowledge? So that's my answer about the UFOs. I really don't know, but I can tell you what the people in the Latter-day Saint Church believe, and to me it makes a lot of sense. So there you go.
Okay, now lots of people will just think you're whacked out. No, I'm being serious. And certainly when you look at something like L. Ron Hubbard's Church of Scientology, kind of takes it to the degree of, oh yeah, you guys are really strange. You don't mention Scientology, and I'm glad you don't. But just out of idle curiosity, what do you think of them?
I don't really have an opinion on it. I've seen some things that they are associated with devil worship, and that kind of fits in with everything else. But I really don't know. Don't know much about it.
Yeah, but isn't the LDS in some ways sometimes viewed as devil worship?
Oh, absolutely. That's the number one. That's the number one accusation of all these other churches, is that the Latter-day Saints worship the devil. And I grew up hearing this crap, and I never, except for tempting Jesus and the stories everybody hears. No, there's no devil worship in the Latter-day Saint Church. And let me just tell you why you think, for your listeners, why do you think the way you do? Because the Latter-day Saint Church came along, and the first thing that they did was say, our preachers do not get paid. Missionaries don't get paid. It's all volunteer. So can you imagine being a preacher and these guys come into your town and they say, no, that church is not only not correct, but when we're making another church and nobody gets paid, it's all volunteer. So when you start to mess with people's...
How on earth do they live? What do they do? Go boost cars at night?
They're lawyers, scientists, psychologists, accountants. We have. I'm sure you've heard of Brigham Young University, but Latter-day Saints are told we're told do not go into debt except for college. So I don't know what else to say, but we or the Latter-day Saints are very much into education and picking up as much scientific knowledge as possible. And so anyway, but back to this thing about what's called the paid priesthood. Of course, you step on the Catholics' toes because that whole organization is based on getting paid to do things. But no, the Latter-day Saints, the people in the what's called the presidency, like we have a modern day prophet, and he's the head of the church and all that. I think they have a salary or something. But everybody from the bishop, everybody in your local wards, churches, and all that, they have jobs, and then they have to do the church thing too. So when you come out and start threatening people's livelihoods, especially on something over religion, then that kind of upset people, and it certainly upset people about Joseph Smith.
Right. Early on in the interview, you were talking a great deal about the Greeks. What is your interest in the Greeks? They don't seem to have any direct bearing on the Mormons or UFOs or anything.
Actually, that's not true. Okay, as far as the Greeks go, for me personally, the Greeks are pure raw knowledge. You read anything the Greeks wrote, you read their tragedy, you read their comedy, it just all hits you. It's almost like reading a holy scripture. They are so honed, they are so to the point, and you don't get any kind of literature in almost anything that I've ever read. Except for from the Greeks. Now, also the Greeks had a very exciting history, with their Peloponnesian Wars and the fighting the Spartans, and they've even got some movies made out of it. And so I think that on top of all of that, the Greeks were so into being good people, and that transferred to the Romans. If you look at the Lives by Plutarch, there's this emphasis on the Romans when they decide if a person is worth reporting about. They decide about how much virtue that person had, right? Virtue, virtue. Look it up. The Greeks were like that. They were putting out Boy Scouts, before there were even Boy Scouts. And I've talked on your show about watching the show Batman, the old TV series. You know, it's the same thing. Those Greeks were so into being good and honest and virtuous. And if they came out, could you imagine if some of those Greeks were to come into our society today and see who's running our country and see what our whole system is based on? They'd say, oh, this is what happens when you let savages come into your country. Because remember, the word barbarian is from the Greek, because that was anybody who didn't speak Greek spoke barbar, right? And they weren't even they weren't worthy of consideration. So our word barbarian, and if people came to our country, they would say, look, of course you've got this. You're overrun with barbarians. I mean, even the people that shouldn't be barbarians are so poorly taught that they are also barbarians.
But isn't it also fair to say that for every Greek Batman, he had his pet bat boy?
As far as slavery?
No, homosexuality.
Yeah, well, there was that. I think Socrates makes a pretty good discussion about it when I think Alcibiades is one time talking about this boy he's in love with, and Socrates says that's sexual love. It's not real love. How can you possibly be claiming to love this boy if you're just interested in him physically? If you really love him, then develop him as a man. So there you go, and maybe that's what happened to Robin.
Okay, we're just about out of time, but I do want to get in some absolutely shameless commercialization. Where can people buy Deceptions of the Ages?
The usual places, Amazon. Let's see, on iBooks, I didn't put any pictures in my Deceptions book, but it's available in iBooks, Amazon, Nook, Kobo, Barnes and Noble, all those bookstores, and I also sell it at www.Heinesight, HeinessIGHT.com.
All right, and do you have any other blogs or websites that people might want to drop by and find out what's new with Matthew Heines?
Yeah, you can just go to my website, HeinessIGHT.com, and I'm doing stand-up around Seattle, so I'm putting some videos up on YouTube so you can see some of my jokes. Some of them might actually be funny. And but the last thing that I'd like to say, Simon, is we never even got to touch on the bankers, and so if you read my book, there's a big because a lot of the problems that we have today, where we don't really own our own country, has to do with the idea of the rise of these bankers. And so I wish we would have had time to talk about that, but I encourage people to read the book.
All right, we still have a few minutes.
Okay.
Tell us about the bankers.
Well, I go into so we've got the Freemasons in the 1700s. I think it was Meyer Rothschild made loans to Prince Henry of Germany, swindled him a little bit, but ended up with a pretty large chunk of gold. And he managed to during Waterloo, he managed to manipulate the English stock exchange so that he basically ended up owning most of it when he made people believe that the English had actually lost, and they sold all their stock to him for dirt cheap. So by the 1820s, the Rothschilds controlled England, France, the Vatican Bank, and Italy, their currency. And Amstel Rothschild said, "I don't care who runs the country as long as I control their currency." And so what we have...
That is a fabulous quote. I don't care what nut job is in charge, as long as I'm making the money.
Well, it's not making the money. What they're doing is they're printing this money out so fast that, and this is something that Andrew Jackson or Thomas Jefferson said, I'm afraid these banks are going to make slaves of our grandchildren. and they kept trying to kill this bank. On Andrew Jackson's tombstone, it says, "I killed the bank." Right? This Federal Reserve Bank was thrown at us, and Jackson tried to kill it. Washington didn't want it when they let it expire in the 1812. They threw it out, and Jackson said, "No, and that's why Jackson killed it." And so, anyway, what we have now in our country is people cannot make enough money because every year that they keep printing this money, everything becomes more expensive, but wages don't go up. So what they're doing now is they're turning us all into these wage slaves, and the only thing that we can do to combat that is use the bank credit, right? And what happens if you don't pay a bank loan back? You don't get a job, so your life is over. So these banks control every aspect of our lives, from what we say to what we do, because it's all about paying the mortgage. And if we don't have enough to pay the mortgage, then we're just slaves. So now everybody, and I just want to say this very quickly, when slavery was abolished, a new system came out called peonage, which basically they loaned people the money for their clothes, their food, and all that, and said you have to work it off. Well, what system do we have now? It is a system of peonage, and it's just getting worse. And what we're trying to do is put the whole world under this system of peonage without, we're just a very small percentage of people actually control and actually have any money.
Matthew, we are flat out of time now. I want to really thank you for taking time to talk to us today, and wish you every success with Deceptions of the Ages. It is certainly worth a read, but don't think you're going to tackle it in a couple of hours. It's quite a meaty, thought-provoking book. Matthew, great to talk to you.
Thanks a lot, Simon. Thanks, everybody, for listening.
Okay. Until next time, this is Simon Barrett wishing everyone a happy, healthy, and safe week. We'll be back again soon. Till next time, goodbye.